We have talked a lot about solving problems, creating new markets. But how do you find these problems? How do you discover problems or market needs or customer needs which the customers themselves don't know? So there are some ways of doing it. First is, of course, there's something called hackathons, which are competition. I'll give you some examples in a while, conducted by the government and other bodies, which gives you the problems because it has been discovered by the government or some institute. Then your own personal experience, and then community interaction, going out and talking to people. So a hackathon, Government of India runs a very big hackathon, probably one of the largest in the world, where it gives you problem statements, hardware problem statements, software problem statements, which are actual problem statements that the government wants to be solved, or companies or ministries or departments want to get solved. I strongly encourage all of you to visit the Smart India Hackathon site. You can see a screenshot. And many, many aspiring entrepreneurs and students like you who are watching have participated in the Smart India Hackathon. As you can see, almost 900,000 students, and number of problem statements is about 2,633. So there are 2,600 problems which are announced in this hackathon. And it will continue to be announced every year. And some of you or all of you who want to do a tech startup can actually look up the site and solve the problems. It's there in front of you. And you will find sometime in July, August of every year, the Smart India Hackathon, which is part of the government, will actually invite ideas. And if your idea is selected for any of the problem statements, could be a few hundred problem statements, you can then get a fund to develop your idea. So that's one way. There are also national missions with the government. So some of you who are a bit more advanced may look at different missions which are announced by the Government of India. And you can go to the portal and you can look at some of the missions that's on the portal, and I have shared a screenshot in the slide. You can look it up yourself. Then bodies like banks or financial institutes announce FinTech hackathon. So this is from RBI. Similarly, this is a financial hackathon, a FinTech hackathon by a large bank, which is Bank of Baroda. So that's about hackathons and problem statements which are publicly announced by different bodies or the government. A lot of times it's self-realization. So many of the startups, especially like Uber or Airbnb, were started by founders who experienced a problem. So someone who could not find a taxi actually went out and created Uber. Someone who could not find a place to stay in went out and built Airbnb. So a lot of times in your own life, as you face problems, you can solve it yourself through your own startups, and that's self-realization. I've already talked about social problems in the last module, and I'll talk again about creating social startups in my next module. But as you go around, you'll see a lot of social problems. And you can use a startup, you can use technology to solve some of these problems. So again, I'd like you to reflect for 3 minutes. But in that 3 minutes, see if you can visit the Smart India Hackathon sites. Identify from the list of Smart India problem statement one or two that you may want to work on and solve. And then it will get you started thinking about problems and solutions, which is the first step towards doing a technology startup. So please visit the website, look at the problem statements, choose one or two, and then write it down in a course journal and start thinking about it. So please reflect for 3 minutes. Now let's look at some of the methodologies for a startup. Because if you want to open a kirana store or a restaurant or a salon, there are many which you can look around and you might just get a lot of ideas from businesses that exist. But in a startup, there's no other business like that you want to create. So there are methodologies. Some of the most famous ones, a lean startup, which came out of the Silicon Valley in the United States, Agile Development, design thinking, which came out of Stanford, etc. Before I get into startup methodologies, let's look at the traditional product development model in existing companies, where first a function called sales or marketing or market research will create the requirements. Once they've created the requirements, they'll hand it over to an R&D team, and they'll not think about it. The R&D team then in their own way develops something, and then they give it to the production team and not think about it probably. Production team then sources the raw material, creates a product. By the time this handovers happened, the requirements of the customer may be very different from what the production department has produced. Then they hand over to the supply chain to package it. and ship it. Then it goes to finance to price it and cost it. And by the time the product is launched in the market, it probably doesn't meet the need of the customer. And therefore, even traditional businesses have a lot of product failure. So let's start with the first methodology called Lean Startup. It was actually put together by a gentleman called Eric Rice, who started a lot of startups, especially in the west coast of US. And the salient features of this methodology is it's very fast cycle iterative versus the traditional waterfall method, which is step by step, and one department hands over, one other department hands over to the next department, and there's not much of feedback maybe. This methodology is very iterative. You start with a problem, start with a solution, check it out with the customer, get the feedback from the customer, make the changes, then again go back to the customer, and you keep making the iterative changes. Every point in time, you are actually talking to the customer, getting feedback, validating your assumptions, testing features and benefits, establishing price points, and so on. So you change very fast, you adapt very fast, you fail very fast, and all the time you're talking to the customer and getting feedback. A similar concept, especially in the software business, is about agile development. Again, an iterative way. It's not the traditional handover way of the waterfall way that one department finds a requirement, passes it on to the next one, they do something, passes it on to the next one, they do something, passes it on to the next one. And by the time the last department has done something, maybe it doesn't meet the customer needs and the product fails. So agile development again is do a bit, test a bit, learn a bit, get feedback, make changes, and so on. So that's agile. Hence the word agile, and earlier the word called lean. The other methodology which came out of Stanford and got popularized in Harvard papers, etc., was the concept of design thinking. And this methodology is all about really getting deep into customer needs. Because a lot of times, the customer doesn't know what is the problem. He's just used to living his life in a certain way. But design thinking actually makes the designer or the startup founder or the agile developer actually understand the life, the experience, the feelings, the emotions of the potential customer. Therefore, it's called empathize. And once you have understood the problems in the life of a customer, day-to-day life of a customer, the customer can be a business or a person, then you start defining the problem. So the problem is defined with deep insights of the customer. And then you start ideating different ways to solve that problem. Then you design it. First you design a prototype. Again you go back to the customer, refine the prototype, go back to the customer, and so on. So the common thing you will see in all of these methodologies for startups, be it lean startup, design thinking, agile development, is very iterative, is very fast cycle, very quick. Maybe hours from one prototype version to the next prototype version. Very interactive with the customers, very multifunctional. So there's no difference between the sales guys or the marketing team who is finding the customer needs and the finance person who is actually defining the price. It's all together. So this is a common thread between some of these startup methodologies, and I encourage each of you to actually go deeper or get into other detailed courses. It could be my course, or it could be some other courses which explains some of these methodologies in detail. One other part, assuming that you've understood the customer problem, assuming that you have developed a customer solution, assuming that the customer is happy with your solution, assuming the customer is willing to pay for the solution, now you have to create a business model which essentially means that if you've done a pilot or a testing with maybe 10 customers, 100 customers, 1,000 customers, how do you then create a business, a profitable business, a long-term sustainable business, where you are probably meeting the needs of 100 million customers, a billion customers, or you are creating products and services for those millions. It is one thing to create prototype of, let's say, the Apple iPhone and get good reviews and then probably test it and maybe even sell it to maybe 100 or 1,000 iPhone users. It's a whole different challenge than to scale that iPhone or that iPod or that service, that e-commerce service or the Netflix platform, and then scale it for hundreds of millions or billions of phone production, iPhone productions or Samsung production, phone production or TV productions, and to meet the needs of billions of consumers of Facebook or Netflix or Flipkart or Ola. And therefore you have to create a business model. And there are many ways of defining a business model. So one of the ways of defining a business model, which means how will you go from a few customers who are happy and paying for a few of your products to crores and millions and billions of customers using and paying your product or service. As you saw in the previous slide, a gentleman called Mr. Alexander Osterwalder defined a simple way to make your business model. And if you look at what's on the screen, this is called a business model canvas. You basically start with your value proposition for the customer. Why will the customer use your product or your service? Why are you better than anybody else? What's new about you? What will you do faster, better, cheaper, or in a more satisfying way? And then in this model canvas, you define who your customers are, who your customer channels are, which means how will you reach those customers, and then what are the customer segments? Men, women, urban, rural, old, young, educated, not so educated, rich, poor. What are the segments that you're targeting? So on the right side, you get all the customer attributes. On the left side are the production-related attributes. How do you produce those services and products? Who are your suppliers? What activities will you do? Will you make? Will you buy? Will you have a lot of people? Will you have big plants? How much money do you need? Etc. So those are the supply side. And the bottom is the financial side. What is the revenue stream? Per day, per week, per month, per year. And then what are your costs to earn this revenue? So in this one simple business model canvas, which is called BMC in short, you can actually define your operating model. So now I'd like you to again reflect for 3 minutes and think about a product or a software that you use. How do you think the product was developed by the founders? Zomato, Ola, Uber, Book My Show, Make My Trip, Netflix, even Google, Facebook, Microsoft. How do you think those founders developed those products? And how do you think that they made the features and benefits of their products useful for you so that many people like you are using those products and services? Think about it, write it down in a course journal, and as you think about it, you'll start developing your entrepreneurial mindset. Reflect for 3 minutes. So with that, we come to the end of this module. Thank you. Namaskar.